Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
Roxan knitted her brows upon noticing the severity of the situation. She no longer appeared as relaxed as she did yesterday. The Research Institute can't sit here and do nothing. Patients can't afford to wait any longer. I'm going to the Research Institute now. She got up and went upstairs to change her clothes. Lucian decided to keep number as he knew it was impossible to stop her. When she came downstairs, he said, I'll not go with you this time. I've explained the situation clearly, so you should know how to negotiate with him. Roxan appreciated Lucian's trust in her abilities. She responded with a grin. Okay. I'll look into it myself. Lucian nodded and added, Call me if you need my help. Roxan hummed in acknowledgement before leaving the mansion. Upon her arrival at the Research Institute, Roxan spotted Linda anxiously waiting outside her office with her face filled with distress. As soon as Linda saw Roxan, she greeted her with eagerness, as if the savior had arrived. Dr. Jarvis, what are we going to do now? The factory has been calling to inquire. The factory was ready for production, and they were just waiting for their registration qualifications and the necessary medicinal herbs. However, they had received neither of them, leaving the project hanging. Roxan comforted her with a smile. I'll talk to Mr. Damaris now. Don't worry. Linda nodded and stepped aside. After walking into her office, Roxan's expression slightly darkened. She then picked up the office phone and gave Jack a call. Jack deliberately took his time answering the call. Miss Jarvis, what's the matter? Roxan said calmly. Please let me know when you're available, Mr. Damaris. I wish to talk to you. Upon hearing her address him as Mr. Damaris, his face darkened, and his tone became increasingly cold and sarcastic. What else is there to discuss between us, Ms. Jarvis? Didn't we already make it clear during our last meeting? There are only two options available for Damaris Group and the Research Institute. Either terminate the collaboration or increase Damaris Group's share. Roxan lowered her eyes. You're just pressuring me to accept the second option, Mr. Damaris. As soon as she finished speaking, she heard Jack snort coldly. You reap what you sow, Ms. Jarvis. I wanted to have a heart-to-heart with you and reach a middle ground on the matter, but it seemed you'd decided to follow Mr. Farwell's lead. While he might be a sharp businessman, he's a fish out of water in the pharmaceutical industry. Roxan's expression changed, revealing a flicker of aversion towards Jack. Let's not drag anyone else into the discussion, Mr. Damaris. This is between you and me, Roxan said, attempting to divert to another topic. May I know when it would be convenient for you to discuss the matter? Jack retorted, Did Mr. Farwell come up with another brilliant idea? Roxan pursed her lips before responding. No one else is involved in this. It'll just be the two of us. I'm sure you're aware that the ones who will bear the brunt of the postponement of the product launch are the patients who rely on it. Jack finally agreed after hearing it would be just the two of them. You're right, Ms. Jarvis. I don't want the patients to suffer. Let's meet at noon today. Very well, I'll come and meet you, Roxan replied. Jack let out a baffling chuckle. Of course. By right, you should have come to me the last time too. I've been too kind to you. This statement unequivocally restored the two to their status as business partners. Nevertheless, Jack pulled an attitude and sounded condescending. It didn't take long for Jack to send Roxan the address of the meeting place. She took a glance at the message and noticed that the place he had chosen was the cafe where they had a fight previously. I guess he's trying to use the chance to humiliate me, huh? If this had happened in the past, Roxan would have rejected to meet with him without hesitation. However, since she was at her wit's end, she could only make the appointment on time. When she arrived, Jack was already seated in the cafe, casually fiddling with the aroma lamp at the side. He showed no response even when he saw Roxan enter the cafe. Roxan lowered her eyes and greeted him, "Je Mr. Damaris." Looking as if he had just noticed her, Jack turned his head and flashed her a polite smile. "Miss Jarvis, you're here. I didn't notice you. Come, have a seat." Roxan gave a slight nod before sitting down beside Jack calmly, only to see him still messing about with the aroma lamp nonchalantly. Sensing her gaze, Jack explained in a low voice, "The fragrance in the lamp has a calming effect. In order to avoid getting into a fight with you like last time, I'm trying to make it burn faster." His confident tone made it seem as if the aroma lamp would really have an effect. Roxan retracted her gaze and pursed her lips. Smiling, she said, "If you have the same goal as me, Mr. Damaris, we would naturally not quarrel." Jack fiddled with the aroma lamp for a while more before finally stopping when he was satisfied. Turning to look at Roxan, he asked, "EO? What is your goal, then, Ms. Jarvis?" Roxan answered seriously, "The original purpose of developing this medicine focuses on the patient's benefits and is aimed to reduce the burden on patients." Acting as though he had heard a joke, Jack snickered. In that case, why would you care so much about the profit share, then? Isn't it good enough for you to have the medicine on the market?" Jack thought that Roxan would say something to refute him, but unexpectedly, the woman simply nodded in agreement before saying, Well, that's what I thought at first. As long as the medicine can be successfully listed, I don't care if all the profits go to you." At that, Jack frowned lightly while a flash of surprise flitted across his eyes. Roxan continued, "That being said, it was all thanks to you that I realized that as the person in charge of the Research Institute, I am not only a doctor, but I am also responsible for the lives of the employees. Mr. Damaris, I'm sure you're aware of just how hard the research and development process for the medicine is this time. If the Research Institute failed to rake in any profits, I'm afraid the employees will be very disappointed in me. It will be difficult for the Research Institute to retain its employees in the long run." Roxan retracted her gaze and pursed her lips. Smiling, she said, "If you hove the same goal as me, Mr. Damaris, we would naturally not quarrel." This was the warning that Jack gave her during their last meal together. It was also something Lucian had taught her over time. "I have to protect the interests of not only the patients but also the employees." Hearing her reason, Jack burst out chuckling while nodding his head. Clapping his hands, he started, "Your words ring true, Ms. Jarvis, but what you just said must have been taught to you by Mr. Farwell, right?" Seeing the disdain glinting in his eyes and the contemptuous expression on his face, Roxan felt her heart go cold. She recalled the time when she first met Jack at the medical consultation. Her impression of the man was that he was a very qualified heir to a prestigious family of traditional medicine. She felt that he was gentle, courteous, and an all-around gentleman. When everyone doubted me, Jack was the one who stood up for me and chose to believe me. But now, it seems like he has changed into a different man. He's ignoring the patients' lives for the sake of profit. Roxan explained, I told you before that this has nothing to do with him. He doesn't even know that I'm here today." Tamping down the odd feeling surging within her, she tried her best to remain calm as she stared at the man before her. "Mr. Damaris, the reason why you're doing this is to increase the share of profits for Damaris Group, right? But unfortunately, it's impossible for me to agree to a 50% share. Since that's the case, why don't we meet each other halfway?" Jack sneered. "For your sake, I hope it's true that Mr. Farwell has no idea about our meeting today. Otherwise, should he suddenly appear halfway through our conversation, I don't think we'd have anything more to talk about." Not wanting to hear Lucian's name coming out of Jack's mouth again, she cut in, "Just tell me what the lowest share you can accept is, Mr. Damaris?" Jack answered without hesitation, "As I have already mentioned a long time ago, even if Damaris Group does not take the lion's share, the least would be a 50-50 share with the Research Institute." Showing no sign of relenting, Roxan pressed on, "We can pay 3 times the price for the medicinal herbs provided by Damaris Group. As for the sales channels, we can also find another company to cooperate with. This meant that our cooperation with Damaris Group is only in the initial phase. What happens later is simply a pure trading relationship. So tell me, Mr. Damaris, why should I split the profits 50-50 with you? To that, Jack said, because right now, you're the one who's begging me. He was certain that he was the one holding all the cards at the moment, and he reckoned Roxanne had no other choice but to oblige. Roxanne stated, 30%. That's the best we can do. When Jack heard that, his expression darkened, and his tone was mixed with sarcasm when he said, In that case, I don't think there's a need for us to talk today, Ms. Jarvis. The last time we met, she proposed that Damaris Group get a 28% share of profits. That was why we ended our meal on a sour note. And now, she has the gall to propose a mere 2% increase? If that's the case, we could have just negotiated this on the phone. Roxanne pursed her lips and kept silent, her eyes shining with a look of determination, as if saying that it was impossible for them to give in anymore. Time ticked by. When Jack realized Roxanne was not budging, his expression changed, and he critiqued, That's the best you can do. Well then, I guess you don't really take the lives of those patients seriously, huh? Although Roxanne looked as calm as ever, her heart was actually lurching. In the end, she decided to take one final gamble. If you can't accept this, then we have no choice but to change our medicinal herb supplier. To tell you the truth, the Research Institute has already found a supplier. However, I still think that the medicinal herbs produced by Damaris Group are of higher quality when compared to other companies. The reason why I'm still trying to negotiate a deal with you is so that the patients can buy better medicines for less money. What she was implying was that if Jack refused to take the deal, the Research Institute would have to turn to another company that would take it. A look of bafflement flitted across Jack's eyes. The quality requirements for this kind of medicine are very strict. So how is it possible for Roxanne to have found another supplier already? But now that I think about it, Lucian was also present during our previous negotiation. Although Farwell Group has never dabbled in the field of medicine, they are not without connections in this area. If Lucian offered his help, it is not impossible for the Research Institute to find another supplier in a short time. With that thought in mind, the look in Jack's eyes turned solemn, but he was quick to hide it. Just like that, the two of them were in a stalemate as they kept their silence to see who would yield first. Time passed, and Jack was the first to lose his patience. He muttered, Since your resolve is firm, and the medicine is also of great importance to Damaris Group, let's each take a step back. Damaris Group will take 40%, while the Research Institute will take 60% of the share of profits." Seeing that Jack had finally capitulated, Roxan inwardly heaved a sigh of relief and continued to lower Damaris Group's profit split. Damaris Group will take 35%. From the moment he spoke first, he had already lost. He remarked with a scowl, "You really know how to conduct business, Ms. Jarvis. I'm impressed." Roxanne replied calmly, "I merely stated the facts. Besides, in the future, we'll be purchasing the medicinal herbs by ourselves, so Damaris Group won't suffer any losses either. It seems like Mr. Farwell has taught you well." Jack sneered. Instead of continuing that topic, she added, "Oh, right, the collaboration between the Research Institute and Damaris Group isn't long-term. Thus, the profit split is only applied to this project. Any collaborations between the two entities in the future will be discussed if and when it happens." Jack's smile slowly turned cold as he could no longer control his expression. "As expected from you, Mrs. Farwell. You really are an expert in conducting business." The fact that he kept bringing Lucian up ticked Roxanne off. Her countenance darkened as she spat. If you want to chat with Mr. Farwell that badly, I don't mind calling him over. I just wanted to point out that you've changed a lot after getting together with Mr. Farwell, Ms. Jarvis." Staring at her meaningfully, Jack commented, To me, you're supposed to be just a doctor. When did you become so opportunistic?" He was basically hinting at her that Lucian was merely using her for his own benefit. Upon understanding the meaning behind his words, Roxanne was amused. I wonder if Jack can still say the same thing if he learns Lucian told me to agree to the 50% split and use the opportunity to learn medicine from the Damaris family. As he observed the change in her expression, he narrowed his eyes. I feel like the thoughts running through her mind right now are things I don't want to hear. His expression turned frigid as he realized that. Then, he silently glanced at the aroma lamp with an icy look. When he faced her again, he nonchalantly changed the topic. How are you planning to set the price for this batch of medicine, Ms. Jarvis? Roxanne contemplated that matter before. Just as she was going to reply to him, he spoke again while gazing at her intently. There are medicines like this overseas, too. Even though their effectiveness is worse than ours, their price range from 700 to 1,000 each. The more expensive ones could sell for more than 10,000. The word "a profit" was scribbled all over his face. However, as if she didn't hear him at all, she uttered, 120. Jack's expression froze as a look of disbelief flashed past his eyes. Moments later, he inquired with a complicated expression, one pill will cost 120? Furrowing her eyebrows, Roxanne uttered, one box. What? He was bewildered. Did you not do any market research at all? Or did I not explain myself clearly earlier? The market price for medicines like this is at least triple your price. As he thought about the number she proposed again, he sneered. Even if we don't compare your price to the market's, there's no way you'll break even with that amount. Do you know how expensive Damaris Group's medicinal herbs are? Do you think your research institute can conduct the research without cost? It seems like I've overestimated Mr. Farwell. His teachings are clearly inadequate. I can't believe how naive you are. Of course, Roxanne did her research before setting the price. Because of that, she became even more aware of the pressure the patients faced. If the medicine cost too much, many people wouldn't be able to afford it and could only wait for their doom. That was a tragedy she didn't want to see occurring again. Yes, my price is low. However, as I said before, I'll buy Damaris Group's medicinal herbs. Once the production of the medicine has matured, the cost of manufacture will drop greatly. Additionally, if the patients are able to afford the medicine, they'll continue to buy them. This way, Damaris Group won't suffer any losses. The only downside is that the profit will be a little low, stated Roxanne confidently. However, Jack just stared at Roxanne as though she was an idiot. What makes you think people will trust that the medicine is legitimate and buy them if you set the price this low? Pursing her lips, she insisted, as someone will buy them. Once they do and realize it works, thousands more will follow suit. Moreover, when the medicine hits the market, it'll have Damaris Group's brand on it. The company has garnered an excellent reputation over the past century, so people will believe in the product when they see Damaris Group's name. That's why I won't give up on Damaris Group that easily. Upon seeing how stubborn she was, he was too lazy to argue with her. You should at least set the price at 300 per box. As doctors, we must consider the issue from the patient's perspective. 300 is still too expensive for them. I disagree with that price, refuted Roxanne. In response, Jack used her own words to question her. Didn't you say you wanted to guarantee the employees' benefits? How are you going to achieve that with such a low price? Do you think everyone's as benevolent as you? Upon hearing that, Roxanne wavered as her expression shifted slightly. That is something I failed to consider. Tightening her fist, she insisted, I'll explain the situation to them. I believe they'll understand me. Most of the Research Institute's employees were personally hired by Harvey, and she believed her teacher had a good eye when it came to people. Additionally, she was confident that long-term profits would be guaranteed. Lastly, she was sure that if people spread the good word about the medicine, she could use it to assure the public that other medicines developed by the Research Institute in the future would be trustworthy. Then tell them yourself. Jack stood up from the couch coldly and looked down at her. I came to negotiate with the utmost sincerity. I even accepted your condition that Damaris Group would only take 35% of the profit. However, I didn't expect you to be this stubborn. Roxan responded by staring at him quietly. Even if you successfully convince the employees in the Research Institute to accept your pricing, my people won't agree to it. Therefore, if you insist on selling each box at 120, then I rather let this medicine rot in the warehouse. His tone was resolute, expressing his disinterest in further negotiation. Just as he ended his sentence, he turned around and headed to the exit. Still, she refused to give up. Do your words reflect old Mr. Damaris' attitude, Mr. Damaris? I don't believe old Mr. Damaris shares the same opinion as him. Without even turning his head, Jack answered, my grandfather has gotten senile, so I'm in charge of Damaris Group now. Contact me when you've changed your mind. He left as soon as he finished his sentence. Roxan stared at the exit for a long time before giving up and looking away. Roxan sat in the cafe for some time before returning to the Research Institute. The result of the discussion was slightly out of her expectations. She was under the assumption that as the heir of the Damaris family, Jack would prioritize a patient's survival regardless of how much he cared about making a profit. Also, she assumed he could accept the marketing strategy of increasing sales by reducing the financial gain margin. To her surprise, Jack was very dissatisfied with the price she offered and even denied her the opportunity to negotiate. How is it, Dr. Jarvis? When will Damaris Group resume the supply of medicinal herbs? Linda approached Roxan the moment the latter stepped into the Research Institute. Roxan forced a smile and said to Linda in resignation, I'm not making any headway for the moment. Please delay the registration process as long as you can. As for the factory, if they are impatient, you can offer them more money. Linda had served Roxan for many years, so she could tell Roxan was caught in a tight spot at that moment by taking in her facial expression. I got it. I'll handle these issues. However, our employees in charge of developing this medicine are getting restless. Upon hearing that, Roxan slightly knitted her brows in anxiety. Most researchers at the Research Institute hoped that the success of inventing that medicine could help them make a living. Now that the medicine had been developed, and they could finally be rewarded after the drug was marketed, the process was unfortunately stuck at the final phase. At that instant, Roxan couldn't help but doubt herself. Is Jack right? Am I too naive to assume the simplicity of this matter? Not everyone can regard a patient's survival with utmost importance like me, after all. After contemplating for a long while, Roxan decided to stand firm on her original intention, so she said to Linda in an undertone, pay their bonuses in advance using my name. Linda suddenly recalled something and asked, some time ago, Mr. Damaris also announced his will to provide the employees with incentives from his own pocket. When he banks in the money, refund the amount to him, Roxan interjected without hesitation. This is the most critical moment during our negotiation. I cannot allow Jack to have too many interactions with my employees. If he knows we haven't found a backup supplier for our medicinal herbs, he might even refuse to accept a 35% share. Linda hummed in agreement and turned around to execute Roxan's orders. Roxan stayed in her office alone and mulled over the discussion with Jack in the afternoon. On her way back to the Research Institute, she couldn't help but imagine how Lucian would have responded if he had been the one to negotiate the terms with Jack. I reckon he must have some ways to convince Jack to accept selling the medicinal herbs at that low price. She repeatedly picked up her phone and placed it back down as she hesitated to seek guidance from Lucian. However, she gave up on that thought ultimately after some careful ponderation. She had decided to face Jack on her own because she wanted to assess how much she had learned from Lucian throughout that period. Roxan felt Lucian must have believed in her capabilities, too, for allowing her to engage in the discussion alone. Only half a day had passed since my meeting with Jack turned south. I think I should give myself more time. It's not entirely impossible for me to resolve this issue on my own. With that thought in her mind, Roxanne picked up the telephone on the office desk. Then, she started contacting the medicinal herb suppliers that she had previously worked with and found their herbs' quality acceptable. Unfortunately, the suppliers flinched when they listened to her stringent requirements for the medicinal herbs standards. They even doubted the existence of the top-quality herbs mentioned by Roxanne. Roxanne couldn't help but feel a little discouraged after failing to establish contact with any satisfactory medicinal herb supplier after making calls for the entire afternoon. She had contacted almost all of the medicinal herb suppliers that had previously collaborated with the research institute. If I can't find an up-to-par partner, my only choice will be to put more effort into sealing the deal with Jack. In that case, the research institute will be in a disadvantageous position. Roxanne couldn't figure out any solution even as evening arrived. At that moment, Lucian called. She recomposed herself before answering the phone. "Are you getting off work now?" His voice was filled with concern. Hearing his voice, Roxanne felt unbidden grievances surge within her. Still, she forced a chuckle as she didn't want to let her emotions show. Not yet, but there's nothing much to do today, so I can get off work anytime. What's the matter?" Lucian frowned slightly as he sensed something amiss about her tone. I'll go and pick you up then. Let's fetch the kids from school together." Roxanne subconsciously relaxed when she heard he was coming. A hint of anticipation crept into her heart as a genuine smile spread across her countenance. Okay. I'll wait for you." The two stopped talking and hung up the phone. Roxanne was worried he might discover her downheartedness when they met later, so she tried her best to pull herself together. Roxanne couldn't help but feel a little discouraged after failing to establish contact with any satisfactory medicinal herb supplier after making calls for the entire afternoon. Linda entered her office. Dr. Jarvis, aren't you leaving yet? Is the matter regarding the supply of medicinal herbs very challenging to deal with? Can I help in any way?" Roxanne's face wasn't as pale and tense as before after she talked to Lucian on the phone. She was further touched after listening to Linda's kind words. Beaming at Linda, she said gratefully, "That's not necessary. You won't be able to provide me with much assistance since you just returned from overseas and lack connections. I'll have to trouble you to pay more attention to the operations at the factory, though." Linda hummed in agreement before bidding Roxanne farewell. Then, she got off work first while Roxanne stayed in her office. Roxanne finally got up and left when Lucian called and informed her that he had arrived at the Research Institute's entrance. When she exited the building, she saw Lucian leaning against the car and looking down at his phone, seemingly focused on his work. Roxanne grinned at the sight of him concentrating on his phone. She hastily approached him, making minimal noise in the process as she planned to scare him. However, Lucian exposed her mischief and caught her red-handed. He pinched her chin, planted a kiss on her lips, and chirped, "I saw you the moment you walked through the doorway." Roxanne nodded. With that, he kept his phone and gentlemanly helped her open the car door. Roxanne blushed slightly. She scanned her surroundings and breathed a sigh of relief after noticing no one was looking in their direction before getting into the car. Lucian walked around the vehicle to open the car door on the other side. How was the discussion with Jack? I noticed you seemed a little moody." Roxanne's gaze darkened at the mention of her meeting with Jack. She replied evasively, "We've already finalized the profit division, but we need to debate further regarding the issue of the medicine's pricing." Lucian glanced up at her via the rearview mirror. He saw her gazing downward and subconsciously placing her intertwined hands on her knees. It was apparent to him that she wasn't being honest, as that was her habitual gesture when telling a lie. He didn't need to probe further to know that the negotiation in the afternoon didn't go well. Nevertheless, sensing her reluctance to elaborate, Lucian decided to have faith in her and give her more time to tackle that problem. Then, he started the car engine. Instead of inquiring further, he uttered in a deep voice, "The back and forth is an unavoidable part of doing business, so there's no need to be hasty." Class had just ended at the kindergarten when Lucian's car pulled up outside the front gate. The two of them got out of the car and stood at the front gate as they waited for the kids. It wasn't long before they sensed the gazes from the other parents falling on them. Isn't that Mr. Farwell? I can't believe he's with his ex-wife. Who are you calling ex-wife? They're about to get back together, so you need to watch what you say. I've always felt that Miss Jarvis had an air of sophistication about her. She and Mr. Farwell are a match made in heaven. As the crowd continued to gossip about them, Roxan felt a little uncomfortable and stepped behind Lucian, lowering her head to avoid their gazes. Having noticed her response, Lucian reached out and wrapped an arm around her waist. As though to declare their relationship to everyone, he then pulled her into his embrace. Roxanne's face burned bright red when she realized people were staring at them. Let go of me. There are lots of people watching. The kids will also be coming out soon. But she exclaimed while struggling a little in his arms. Being seen by the parents is bad enough as it is. I don't know what I'd do if the kids see us like this. The embarrassment would probably kill me on the spot. However, Lucian ignored her protests and tightened his grip on her instead. After a few more failed attempts at breaking free, Roxan had no choice but to give up on struggling. Even so, she still maintained an awkward position in his embrace to put a little bit of distance between them. As the gossiping from the parents reached her ears, Roxan wished the ground would just open up and swallow her whole. I shouldn't have agreed to come pick the kids up with Lucian. A woman in the crowd noticed her reaction and reminded the others softly, hey, cut it out. She heard us. Roxan instinctively glanced in the direction of that woman's voice when she heard what she said. That woman let out a nervous chuckle when she met Roxanne's gaze. Roxan flashed the woman a thankful smile and maintained her awkward posture as she continued waiting for the kids. She began struggling again when she saw the first group of children appear at the school gate with their teacher. This time, Lucian let her have her way and let go of her waist before holding her hand instead. While holding hands was considered normal for couples, she still felt a little embarrassed. We're not a young couple anymore, and yet, we're being so intimate in public. What, I can't even hold your hand? Lucian asked in displeasure when he noticed her frown. Having been snapped out of her train of thought, Roxan shifted her gaze between their hands and the displeased look on Lucian's face. Eventually, she gave in and gently wrapped her fingers around his hand. The next thing she knew, Lucian adjusted his grip and interlocked fingers with her. Roxan heard the parents around them inhaling sharply, but there was nothing she could do except pretend she didn't hear a thing. Fortunately, the three kids' class was one of the first to come walking out. The children stood in a neat line while marching toward the school gates under their teacher's guidance. Daddy. Mommy. The kids exclaimed happily when they saw their parents standing in front of the crowd. Everyone around them went wide-eyed with shock when they heard the way the kids addressed Lucian and Roxan. Even the parents, who had already picked up their kids, stood around and watched nosily, reluctant to leave. They had been seeing the news about Lucian and Roxan on television every night, but this was the first time the two had made an appearance together after the recent news report. On top of that, the two of them were being very intimate with each other in public. Roxan felt quite uneasy when the kids called them a daddy and a mommy in front of so many people. This was the first time she had made her relationship with Lucian public in front of the parents and teachers at the kindergarten. Regardless of whether they had remarried or not, everyone around them already saw her as a member of the Farwell family. Before Roxan knew it, the kids had squeezed their way through the crowd and wrapped their arms around her and Lucian's legs. Daddy. Mommy. Why have you two come to pick us up together today? Benny asked curiously. Roxan simply kept quiet and turned toward Lucian. I happened to get off work early, and your mommy didn't have to work overtime today, so we came here together. What's wrong? Do you kids not like it? He said casually and naturally, as if they had already been a loving family for decades. We love it. The three kids replied in unison. Mommy, could you and Daddy come pick us up together every day from now onward? Estella asked in an adorable voice. Roxan had wanted to tell her that she would come as long as she had the time to, but changed her mind when she saw the expectant look in Estella's eyes. All right. I'll try my best to. Pippa was smiling happily when she saw the sweet and harmonious family of 5. Despite what the public is saying about them, the changes in Estella's condition, all this while prove they're the most suitable for each other. Roxan left with the kids after saying goodbye to Pippa, who simply smiled and waved at her as usual. I made some preparations. We can start the basic lessons once we get back, Lucian told Archie and Benny all of a sudden on the drive home. It took Roxan a few seconds to realize he was talking about teaching them to use a computer. Oh, he even made preparations in advance? I didn't expect him to take it so seriously. As Roxan turned around and saw the pleading look in Archie and Benny's eyes, she could tell that the two geniuses obviously didn't want to start learning from the beginning. Roxan then let out a chuckle and told Lucian, come on, let's not rush things now. They just finished a day of school, so we should let them get some rest. The lessons can wait until the weekend. Noticing that Roxan was helping them out, Archie and Benny quickly played along. We're tired, Daddy. We need some rest. Naturally, Lucian wasn't going to force anything on them. All right then. Make sure to get ready for your classes on the weekend, he replied with a nod. Archie and Benny dreaded those classes, but they smiled obediently and nodded anyway. Okay, Daddy. We'll be prepared. As Estella was sitting very close to them, she could clearly see that they were reluctant to take those lessons. Although she was confused by their reactions, she knew better than to ask them about it. Fearing that Lucian would talk about teaching them to use the computer again, the kids immediately ran back to their bedroom after dinner. Having noticed how much the kids resented the topic, Lucian asked in amusement, do they hate computers, or is it too early for me to teach them this stuff? Roxan glanced in the direction of the stairs and saw that the kids were already nowhere in sight. They don't need you to teach them at all. She then shifted her gaze back toward Lucian as she continued. Archie and Benny grew up in my mentor's research institute. They displayed amazing talent for information technology at a very young age, and that's especially the case for Benny. One of my colleagues at the research institute had been teaching them how to use a computer after noticing their talent, so Benny excels in this area. The serious look on Roxan's face got Lucian wondering just how skilled Archie and Benny were with computers. Meanwhile, in the bedroom, Estella stared curiously at Archie and Benny as she asked, do you two not want Daddy to teach you? As Archie and Benny had no reason to keep secrets from her, they nodded honestly in response. Estella frowned in confusion. Do you two not like computers? Daddy's really amazing, you know? You two will become professional hackers if he teaches you. Lucian used to tutor her personally back then, but he had to stop because she started losing focus due to her condition. He never continued those lessons after that. If Daddy had continued teaching me, I would definitely be the best hacker out there right now. At least, that's what Daddy told me. Archie and Benny exchanged glances as they whispered in her ear. We'll let you in on a little secret here. The truth is, we're already very skilled with computers, so we don't want to start learning everything from the beginning. Estella's face was filled with disbelief when she heard that. I'm better at using a computer than the other kids my age only because Daddy personally taught me. Who could have taught Archie and Benny? Noticing the look of doubt on her face, Benny pulled out his computer and demonstrated his skills with it. You watch closely. Despite what he said, he actually hadn't thought of how he would showcase his skills. The look of doubt in Estella's eyes intensified when she saw him staring blankly at the computer screen. I can teach you if you don't want Daddy to, Benny, she said with a serious expression. I may not be as skilled as Daddy when it comes to such things, but I should be good enough to teach Benny. She was about to take the computer out of Benny's hands when he came up with a bright idea. Wait. I know what I can do. Archie and Estella stared at him in confusion as he booted up the computer and typed rapidly on the keyboard. A few seconds later, a string of codes began running on the screen. Archie and Estella kept their eyes on the screen as they waited eagerly to see what would happen. Benny's eyes were filled with excitement as well. "I'm the second best hacker in the world, but I haven't tried hacking into the system of Daddy's company. People say his company has a really skilled team of technicians in the IT department. They should be off work by now, so I'll try pulling a little prank on them." At around 8 in the evening, the computer screens of all the employees at Farwell Group went black for a few seconds. The next thing they knew, a video clip of 3 kids dancing hand in hand with their buttocks bare appeared on the screens. What the? Who has the audacity to hack into Farwell Group's computer system? As someone exclaimed in shock after realizing that it was the work of a hacker. Most importantly, Farwell Group had the best cybersecurity in the industry, so they couldn't imagine anyone being able to hack into it. On top of all that, the hacker had gone through so much trouble invading their system just to pull a childish prank on them. Angered and frustrated, the employees who were working overtime in the IT department got all riled up and typed away furiously on their keyboards. However, the look of disbelief on their faces only intensified as time went by. This hacker merely planted a tiny virus in our system, and yet, we can't seem to bring it down no matter how hard we try.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.